Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience. We are now ready to begin William Bender's webinar. We are very excited to have William Bender join us today. His webinar presentation will be on project-based learning. The title is Convergence, Project-Based Learning and the Common Core State Standards. I'd like to just review a few housekeeping details. I'd like to mention that there will be a few survey questions and polls throughout the webinar. You will have a chance to type your messages on the bottom left-hand corner, and you will have the option to answer some of his poll questions with either a yes or no.
William Bender.
Yes. Joined.
Yes, so also on the next slide, we will be discussing how to answer various questions that William Bender wants to different questions that William Bender will be posing throughout the webinar session. If you look on your screen on the upper left-hand corner, you will see what we call emoticons, and those will give you the option to answer with a yes or no, or answer multiple choice questions of A, B, C, D. Or if you want to type a chat question or to William Bender, or just start community or conversation amongst each other, feel free to do so on the bottom left-hand screen, as you can see on the slide shown right now. And there is, if there are any multiple choice questions of A, B, C, D, you will see the little emoticon with the letter A. And you just click on that, and you can you just right-click on that icon, and then you can see it as well.
Dr. Bender? Yes, that's me. I'm hearing Dwayne on the other line.
Yeah, that's good. You should. And they're hearing us right now, too, because we're all back in.
Oh, good. Well, we've worked out our little problem then. Thank you for the help. I'll wait. Bye.
Okay, so now we're going to do if there are any yes or no questions, if you click on the little green check mark, they'll give you the choice of the icon. For those of you who do not have audio, you might want to check on your computer if you have the mute button pressed or not, or you might want to try to raise the volume on your computer. Also, I'm pleased to announce that William Bender will be part of our Common Core Institute. This is October 18th and 19th in Memphis, Tennessee. If you're anywhere in the area or actually across the country, please welcome William Bender to join, as he is one of the featured speakers at the Common Core Institute in Memphis, Tennessee. If you would like more information, you can visit www.corwin.com, and you'll find registration and pricing information on there. And now, please allow me to introduce Dr. William Bender. He has authored over 8 different products with Corwin, and we are very proud to present that he is the featured speaker today. William?
Thank you, Dwayne. I've been excited about this webinar for a number of months now, and I apologize for a little technical glitch getting started. As you can see, we're talking about convergence, which is a term I use, representing project-based learning and Common Core standards. Just a bit about my background. I consider myself first and foremost a teacher. My public school years were in grades 8 and 9, where I worked with a plethora of disabilities, as you can see there. Resource room teaching for a number of years. My PhD was North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I was in higher ed for over 25 years and doing the journal writing and book and scholarly thing. These days I have the privilege of working with teachers all over the nation and Canada on a variety of topics. Most of my recent work has been differentiation, RTI, and or project-based learning. I'm finding that convergence of topics is also moving me toward 21st century teaching skills. And some of the things that I've written recently with Corwin and worked on, I'm very, very pleased with my work there in differentiation. That has the The teachers seem to have responded to that. And as I say, I think project-based learning seems to be a tool that we're going to begin to utilize to move all of ourselves into Common Core. Now, with that said, I wanted to share just a little bit of my perspective, and you can see it there on the screen. I don't want to push ourselves well into the 21st century with 20th century ideas. And I've been through 3 different cycles of educational standards in my career. I'm confident that merely adopting new educational standards such as Common Core is not going to have a significant and result in significant enhancement in academic achievement unless it also includes a rethinking of our instructional methods. And that has led me and many other presenters nationwide, many other education folks nationwide, to look at project-based learning as a vehicle for moving into Common Core. I think PBL is our best option to successfully implement the Common Core state standards. And so this is kind of an upfront précis of where I see the next decade, 2 decades taking place in education. Now, I wanted to ask a general question. Please use that poll feature with you. Dwayne, I'll have to ask you to kind of respond to me as they answer this, but I'd like to hear the experience level of PBL from the audience today. You know, you can see the icons there. Please use that poll feature. Dwayne, could you give them a little bit more instruction about how to do that? Or?
Yes, if you just click on the little emoticon with the letter A in the upper left-hand corner, if you right-click on the letter A, you'll see choices of A, B, C, D to answer. There you go. Looks like we're getting some answers.
Good. As soon as you get a sense of where we stand there, I'd like for you to share that with the group there. Dwayne?
Yes, there. See the answers now? There's a poll. He doesn't hear it. Oh, so
I don't see him, Dwayne. That's what I need you to tell me.
So it looks like the poll is about, we're looking at about 14% answered they're new to PBL.
Just read them down, A, B, C, D, and E.
A is about 3%, A is about 6%, B is about 6% as well, C is 8%, and the letter D is 10%. And E is 14%.
Well, 2 things I anticipated going into this. So, number 1, we would have a wide range, and number 2, that the majority of folks are just beginning to look at PBL, which brings up the point, while project-based learning has been around for a number of years, it really is undergoing a major rejuvenation now. I'm seeing an increasing number of articles that are directly tying project-based learning to the nation's move into the Common Core, and we'll talk about why that is and some of the parallels between the two in just a few moments. But this is the type of range that I was anticipating, with a few more folks just beginning to get into it, and it lets me know that later on we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about exactly what project-based learning is. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to take a quick look at first. And that is, knowing and understanding who our 20th century learners are and why project-based learning can facilitate the Common Core. And so as I look at the literature out there, everything from the blogosphere to journal articles, there are kind of 2 approaches to do that, of knowing these learners. What do kids need to learn? Dwayne, are you with me?
Yes.
Very good. In terms of what do these kids need to do to learn for the 21st century, and then what are the learning characteristics? There is a handout, by the way. Dwayne, did you review that with the group? The handout is online?
No, they're just getting it now, and we'll send it afterwards.
Okay. Well, there is a handout that has more extensive information on all of this, on these 2 perspectives, these 2 types of questions. But let me tell you a little bit about what do these kids need to learn, and how I came to the conclusions I'm about to share with you. There was a recent educators panel called the National Research Council report for the National Academy of Sciences. Dennis Sparks did a little writing on it in 2012, and you'll find a reference there once you receive that handout. And their conclusions were there were several different types of skills or sets of skills that 21st century students are going to need. Cognitive skills, and you will notice the similarity, the parallel here between Common Core. They talk about deep understanding, transfer of knowledge, knowledge application, rather than just rote skill in operations and whatnot. The 21st century kids will need to learn interpersonal skills, collaboration, next century communication skills. These skills are going to be much more important in the workplaces going forward than in assembly line types of things from the early 20th century. And then intrapersonal skills. This is where many students today are not making the grade in terms of resiliency, persistence in a hard task, persistence in a tough homework assignment, resourcefulness and thinking through. So these different three sets of skills were what the national panel identified as 21st century learning skills that all individuals are going to need for the modern workplace. Now, in a recent book that I shared with you earlier, a book, one of the books I've developed with Corwin called Cool Tech Tools for Lower Tech Teachers. My co-author, Ms. Laura Clark, and I identified several different aspects in relation to how kids learn. What types of things do they do that might be different or have been enhanced in recent years? And we came up with a little acronym, C2S2 kids. Once we had talked about this a half a dozen times or in a half a dozen chapters, we went back and literally wrote this acronym into that upcoming book on technology skills. And I want to walk that through. That stands for collaborative learners, creative learners, social learners, and self-directed learners. In terms of collaboration, the 21st century workplace is going to require a number of collaborative skills that have not been largely stressed in the educational settings of the late 20th and early 21st, first decade of the 21st century. It's very, very rare that 5 people in an office today, in a workplace today, are given the same task, told to compete on it and see who does it better. Well, that's essentially the model for 20th century education. Everyone's given a set of math problems or a set of written language arts types of problems, and then they compete, and then they see who gets the highest grade. Tomorrow's workplace, today's workplace, and more so tomorrow's workplace are going to require collaboration among the learners, and consequently, this is how kids are learning today, and will be so more so over the foreseeable future. Creative learners. The technology available today, which is a large component of our move into the Common Core, stresses the creation of content rather than just consuming of content. I like to use the statement that when I myself was in school, there were 3 ways to deliver knowledge to kids. They were the teacher as information delivery system, a textbook as information delivery system, and once in a while the World Book Encyclopedia down at a local media center. And each of those information systems saw kids as a passive recipient of information. I also make the point that today all 3 of those systems are out of date. Teachers generally in the 21st century classroom will not be serving as an information delivery source. There will not be broad spans of lecture information. There should be collaborative tasks assigned, and teachers will serve as facilitators. Even the textbooks that have been so plentiful for the last 100 years in education are being now replaced by e-books, which provide a whole wide range of built-in assistance that the flat page of a textbook cannot provide. And of course, the World Book Encyclopedia needs to be dusted off. Nobody's touched it in at least a decade now. Everybody starts with Wikipedia and then looks for other online sources. So when I say creative learners, Learners are no longer passive. The 3 information delivery systems that used to be used are now out of date, and we're going to be we are now transitioning into some other delivery systems. The Common Core has a heavy, heavy emphasis of technology within it. And of course the NET standards from the International Society of Technology Education folks, you know, I like to see Common Core and NET discussed as the standards for the future. Now, when you get to the S2 aspects of kids are social learners in ways that they did not used to be. I'm frequently in a position working with schools where I ask teachers to say, what is the internet availability these kids have at home? When we talk about things like Khan Academy and some of the other things we'll mention a little later. And teachers sometimes say, well, only about half the kids have computers and whatnot, and they really can't use them. And I say, well, how many of the kids in middle school are on Facebook? Well, that knocks it on about 90–95%. These kids have computers. They are using them somewhere in many, many cases. Kids are demonstrating by their own behavior a desire for more social learning situations. And I think in order to be responsible for today's kids, we need to provide that, and that goes hand in hand, of course, with the collaborative nature of future learning that we discussed. The 4th aspect is self-directed. If we can provide students with some degree of choice, some degree of selection, we find that kids will take more ownership of what they are doing. And ownership is going to be, I call it, sometimes I use the term ownership of learning, sometimes I use the term cognitive engagement. If we get kids cognitively engaged with the Common Core standards, they're going to begin to master them. If they are not cognitively engaged, probably will not. And if we give a little bit of self-direction opportunity within those standards, then kids are going to do better on them. Now, the thrust of project-based learning, as we'll see in a few moments, is built on student-generated questions and student-selected projects. And having students is a powerful, powerful tool to watch students relate the standards that they must master to a project that they want to undertake. In fact, with that in mind, there's one of the videos that we're going to discuss here today. It's a little bit longer one, so I couldn't build it within a 1-hour time frame, but one of them is a student-generated video that I would love for every teacher to see, in the sense that students themselves are saying, we don't have any courses anymore. We just take these educational standards and we relate them to the projects that we select based on our interest, and we have the responsibility to make certain that we meet these standards. The school I'm referring to was a high school in Minnesota that has been operating as a project-based high school for a number of years. And by the way, when I mention these videos, there are 3 videos in the reference list for the handouts. I do encourage you to get these handouts, download them, and I do encourage you to take a look at each of the several videos there. Now, with that said, I'd like to hear, I was going to kind of take a quick look at the chat question. I'd like to hear, are there other types of characteristics that some of the audience has seen within their own classrooms, their own teacher settings, that perhaps should be listed here as representative of how kids learn in the 21st century? Dwayne, I'm going to have you take a look at what chat questions and discussions are coming up and kind of share a few of those interesting ones with me, please.
Yes, of course. The slide is posted, so people are just starting to type in their answers. Some people are talking about exploration.
Yes, yes. Exploration. Listen, that could be a different indicator itself. Could also be kind of tied with the creative thing in that C2S2 that I mentioned. Any other ideas there?
There's also experimentation, inquiry.
Okay. I love seeing the experimentation because, again, that ties in nicely with the project-based learning model that we're going to talk about. There is a hypothesis testing that can be built into project-based learning approaches.
Some people have also added creation, what about non-linear learners?
And I'll have to think about that one. I'm sorry to say that's going to take a little bit of a while. I'm looking at the chat room now. I see a wonderful little comment. It looks like Victoria. Helpful to look at characteristics of the teachers who will be affected with PBL. To respond to that, Victoria, I think all teachers can be effective with PBL, but as you and I would both know, we've both been in schools, we both work with large groups of teachers. Some teachers are going to wade into this with a sense of exploration of a new teaching idea. They're going to be ecstatic to do it. Others are going to be a little bit more reluctant to launch themselves in it. So while I think those teachers who are a little more reluctant should start it a little more slowly. I would recommend that perhaps they should think of one project in a class that is successful currently, a class that they are very comfortable with the content, and then go from there and see if they can explore project-based learning in other classes that they may teach. Very good. Okay, if we could progress that forward, Dwayne, thank you. What I want to address here, I use the term convergence of current trends. By that term, I mean that there are a number of things that are already ongoing in education that seem to be converging now to create a different sense of how we operate in our classes. I would include, for example, differentiated instruction, tech-based learning, and response to intervention. Those three, I just wrote a book called Teaching Revolution, in which I argued that this was an example. Those three particular trends were merging. When I am asked these days to do a response to intervention workshop, for example, I request that we spend some time on differentiation, because differentiated instruction needs to be tier 1 of RTI. Tech-based instruction needs to be infused throughout response to intervention. And as such, I see those three innovations, recent innovations in education, kind of merging now. Now, when you couple that with Common Core standards, which everyone is going to be struggling with over the next 3 to 5 years, and project-based learning, these instructional trends are, I believe, as I say, merging to create an entirely different type of teaching. In one sense, it gets back to Victoria's question, and it addresses what's teaching going to look like. And again, I would like to refer to that I'd like to recommend that everyone take a look at the videos that we have kind of built in here. Now, in the interest of time, Dwayne, can you go ahead and put in that chat screen that first video for the folks to take a look at?
Yes, there it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to take a look at this YouTube video on project-based learning. This one is about a 5-minute video. And you'll probably, Dwayne, did you give them instructions on how to do that? Did they just click on the thing over there in the...
Yes, that's all they have to do. Just click on the link.
Very good. Have them click on the link. I'm going to give you a 5-minute time frame right now to view that video, and then we'll be back up in the window, okay? If everyone would click on that link and view that video. video. And listen, I am so sorry to do that to you. I am excited to talk with you about the workshop. Are you now? Did Renee?
Absolutely, yes, you are available, and yes, you can do it. And
Shannon, did I just make a mistake in which company you're with?
This is Corwin.
Thank you. I do workshop. He said he could see me.
Oh, I think.
Up, or do I just go ahead and?
I think you can proceed with your chat question.
Very good. Well, what I wanted to ask after that video. Oh, excuse me. No, we need to progress the screen a couple of more.
How's this one? Chat question.
That's what I wanted to look. Again, another chat question. Did anyone see examples there? Let me back up. I know there are examples there. What did you guys hear in terms of the types of cognitive skills, deeper learning, and transfer that we want to foster through the Common Core? Take a moment and answer in the chat window. Let's see, this from Kathy. I'm impressed that the administration is receptive to letting the teachers restructure their day. Kathy, I have to tell you, when I saw that video, I had the same response. I was tickled to death that these teachers, first of all, I was very proud of the teachers taking it upon themselves to go talk to the administration and say, listen, we believe we can do a better job if we try this. And then for the administrator to say, yeah, that looks reasonable. I'm sure these professionals approach that principle on the basis of, here's the research that we saw on the efficacy of project-based learning. And for those of you that want that research, I summarized every bit of it in that project-based learning book that I just did with Corwin. Any other comments? Anyone else see anything else that impressed them on this particular little video example? Very good. Well, let's take a look. Now, with that video example in mind, I wanted to share with you, I see Kathy's another comment. I like the teachers collaborate and share with the kids. I wanted to share with you a definition that I have created of project-based learning. Of course, if you ask 80 experts to give you a definition, you probably get 100 of them. But I prefer a definition that is more so than a mission statement or a set of lofty goals. I prefer something that really describes what something like PBL is and what it isn't. So let me share this with you. Project-based learning involves a student-driven inquiry into a highly motivating problem project using modern technologies, allows students to address authentic problems from the real world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the first part of that definition gets at student engagement. If our students are telling us by inattention that they're not highly motivated with the math problem in the textbook, then we need to listen to that message and say, okay, how do we give these students a real-world task that involves the mathematics we wish to teach, and then let the students go with that, and the students learn that math in the context of that broader problem. Now, next part of the definition. In PBL instruction, the projects drive the structure of the instruction. And here again, this is my Occam's razor, if you will. Here I'm trying to say what PBL is and what it isn't. The projects drive the structure of the instruction, not lesson plans on a day-by-day basis or even units or even courses. Project-based learning involves mapping projects to standards covered and may replace instructional units and or courses entirely. publication of student work is the ultimate payoff within project-based learning. Now let's get back to this PBL, what I'm saying here in the last part of that definition. Projects involve the replacement, if you will, of instructional units or lesson plan. Many of us taught using projects as an adjunct to the lesson in whole group instruction. Well, I have argued for the last decade that differentiated instruction allows us to essentially replace that whole group lesson plan with something that is much more inclusive of the wide array of student capabilities we have in the room and offers a wider array of activities in that classroom. That's the differentiation part of differentiated instruction. But when I began to really explore PBL, I was tickled to death to find many examples where there is no unit of instruction anymore. For example, within the context of PBL, a 8th grade teacher who is teaching earth science may undertake a unit on tornadoes, and within the context of that unit, teach a whole array of earth science information that may cover what in a more traditional class would be considered 2 or 3 different instructional units. Now finally, as you explore PBL, the following example is kind of rare, but it does give a sense of how PBL pushes education. There are examples of schools that no longer have courses that are doing project-based learning. In fact, let me give you very specifically the name of one. There is a YouTube video that is a 30-minute video, and as such, I cannot build it into a 1-hour discussion of this. But the name of the video is in the handout that accompanies this webinar. And that particular video is called Project-Based Learning, Mummified Chickens, Mutant Frogs, and Rockets to the Moon. As you can tell from that title, it is a student-generated video. And folks, I can't tell you the power of watching a student say, well, we really don't have courses and we really don't have classrooms in our school. We have student individual workspaces and we have collaborative workspaces. And it is the student's responsibility to take, in this case they were using Minnesota State standards, to take those Minnesota State standards and say, I want to do a project where, since I've always been interested in Egypt and mummification, where I mummify a chicken. And within that project, I'm going to build in certain science standards within the area of chemistry. I will have math standards, I will have some measurement built in, and I will have some cultural studies standards built in. In that case, this is a case I can point to in Minnesota, project-based learning has actually replaced the old course structure that we have been so dependent on over the last 150 years in American education. Now, that is a very extreme example. But I do like, to get back to this PBL definition. I think there are examples of projects that replace, instructional lessons, instructional units, and in some cases courses. Dwayne, did you have a comment there?
Yes. Someone has a question. They would like to know if you have done any PBL on Native American reservations.
That is a wonderful question. I have not done so. Let me share with you one discussion that I had. I had the opportunity to be working in the Crow Reservation in southern Montana. This was just last December. I was working with a school in a little town called Pryor, Montana. And the work was on differentiation, and they were doing a school improvement type of grant, and I was there in the school improvement funds working with this school. Found some highly motivated teachers, great teachers there, teaching in a tough situation. I mean, some Native American reservations, there's high unemployment in some of these instances. And as I say, I've worked on 3 different reservations just in the last 6 months. But in this particular case, we were discussing project-based learning. I had the opportunity to watch a group of kids perform what they call the hand game, which in Crow society is a basically it's a gambling game if you look at it in one sense, but it's also a much deeper, more spiritual meaning. And many Native American customs have a spiritual element, whereas a Westerner like myself may look at, oh, that's a gambling game, which it is. But it's also a deeply spiritual thing. So I was watching these kids, and they showed me this, and they did a crow chant with it. They then managed to relate that. They would say, I asked them, I said, how many is this thing on the internet anywhere? Have you ever shared that with the world? And I could see the light in these kids' eyes. Kind of, they were in a cultural studies course there in the high school grade level, and I had the opportunity to kind of watch that light go on their eyes. And I turned to the cultural studies teacher and said, well, do you think it'd be appropriate, for them to give the same explanation to me, to a digital camera, and make that available? Now, of course, in some Native American populations, there is a sense that we want to preserve our culture for ourselves and not necessarily share it. But in that case, I was recommending a project-based learning experience in a cultural studies course, and I watched the light go on in kids' eyes thinking, that'd be cool, This is something that they were sharing with me. It was truly interesting for somebody like myself who has kind of a historical bent and curiosity anyway. But I was watching this project idea kind of dawn after I mentioned it. The kids kind of said, oh, we could do this, we could do that, and the teacher was right along with them. So that's about as close as I've come. I would recommend this with Native American cultures for one simple reason. This is the best tool I've seen to increase engagement of kids, to increase motivation of kids. And in many cases, that motivation is one of the issues with Native American populations. Now, I see one other question from Jody here concerning the definition of PBL, how important to present this student work as to authentic audiences. Jody, the answers to that question in the literature kind of range. Some of the proponents of PBL are absolutely adamant that the presentation to an authentic audience, whether it is an audience that's school-based or whether it's a community governing association or whether it's a board of supervisors for the city or what have you, can be absolutely critical. Again, that is part of the motivation which increases the engagement in project-based learning. And as we get to a little later on in our session, the research on project-based learning shows very high levels of engagement and very high levels of academic achievement associated with project-based learning. As long as we pay attention to the middle part of the definition that's currently on your screen, that is, that in PBL instruction, project drives a structure, not lesson plans, but PBL projects must involve mapping of standards that are to be covered over the projects that students generate. I kind of like the Minnesota example that's in that other video simply because that puts that responsibility on the shoulders of the kids. Now, let's move on. I want to talk a little bit about the components of project-based learning. Excuse me, I just missed a step. Let's take a quick look at this screen. Unpacking this definition, PBL student-generated, student-selected projects drive the curriculum, projects assigned within units of instruction. And here again, this is kind of the Occam's razor aspect of that definition. Many good educational projects are done all the time in schools. But for me, given the emphasis of that definition I just shared, a good project that is an adjunct to an instructional unit, even one that cuts across 2 or 3 instructional units, is not project-based learning. In project-based learning, the projects drive the curriculum, not serve as adjuncts to a unit of instruction. And then again, project-based learning must involve associated projects with standards covered. I like to see that as a student responsibility. I have another little video here. I would like to skip that in the interest of time, but I do encourage, again, the audience to take a quick look at, by the way, what you just saw on your screen was 2 different videos, a chat question that we're likewise going to skip, but the homework assignment here is that Minnesota video that I mentioned. It's from Ed Vision Schools, and it's the one, Mummified Chicken, et cetera, et cetera. I do urge you, all participants should watch that video at some point. And the actual URL is here on the screen. It's also in your handout. Now, let's take a look at what components are involved in PBL. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here. In the sense, if you take a look at these components and think in terms of the C2, S2 kids and the types of work requirements that we did earlier in terms of the future workplace. Students in the future workplace, as they grow and join the work environment, they're going to need to sit down with other folks. They're going to need to brainstorm a problem. They're going to need to identify topics within that problem and a driving question. They're going to identify, oh, take a look at the term there near the top of the screen, artifact. One of the groups of proponents of PBL uses the term artifact to represent any product created by the students in a project-based learning. Within a single project-based learning project, there might be 24 artifacts that are delivered, that are developed and delivered. There might be half a dozen. All that is negotiated in the upfront time frame. Once students make the decisions about the driving question, about the overall scope of the project, you got a question there about where to get the handouts. Meredith, they can be downloaded from Corwin Press website. Talking about the components of PBL, what we have here are the components of PBL, but these also represent the exact skills students are going to use in collaborative work in the workplaces of the 21st century. Have you got me, Dwayne? I see somebody said lost audio. I believe it's still working. May need to help Jeff there. Couple of thoughts on this. When we, within the context of our discussion of Common Core, talk about the types of things that Common Core is intended to do, to develop transfer of knowledge, to engage kids, to focus kids on problem-solving sets. The components of PBL here fit nicely within that Common Core paradigm. And the point I wanted to make right here was talk about components. Now, the components of PBL will vary from one group or one author to another. I've listed a bunch of things here. Some authors have some of these, others would have others. Searching for info, synthesizing information, developing project parameters, collaborative decision-making, communication of the project. Now, the communication of the project normally involves the publication to a larger audience that one of our questioners was just referring to. There are examples of projects where that is not the case, but I do like seeing that broader audience, if you will, for communication. And again, every one of these components, if we can flip to that next slide there, every one of them are 21st century workplace skills. Now, let's take a look at the steps in PBL. If we can go on one more slide. Dwayne, I need to hear an answer on this. We got in a little late. Should we aim at having some questions in about 5 minutes, and that'll take us on about 4:10 East Coast? Does that sound okay? No. Listen, the steps in PBL project, I've synthesized steps from a number of different groups here. I've also used the term anchor. Some of the PBL proponents use the term anchor to mean a narrative, a brief story, a description of an issue, and that can be a written paragraph that the teacher surmises or an assignment that the teacher finds. And so I recall one good example of a project where a teacher basically found an invitation to undertake a project to help a city design a local fountain and local historic site. And the teacher in that case literally used that as the anchor and then allowed the students to kind of create driving questions in the project. The next step, of course, once students working as a team get into a PBL group, you can assign students to the group, but then you got to do specific assigned tasks for each group and each member of the group. The delineation of artifacts, what are the types of products that are going to be produced in order to complete the project. In many projects that go on sometimes 6 weeks or 9 weeks across the school year, there are artifacts that must be developed by the end of the first week and a half, because later work within that project is going to be dependent upon having the first artifact developed fairly quickly. Some artifacts may be survey this or that out-of-school population and use that information to help complete the project toward the end of the project. So some artifacts are developed all the way through the PBL, and that helps teachers maintain, and students for that matter, maintain the sense that project is ongoing and progress is being made. Identifying learning processes within PBL and what those processes, what those tasks involve, time frame developed for all of the artifacts, and then what publication options there are. How do we do state testing with PBL? Patricia's gotten right to the meat over there. My compliments to you, Patricia. Let me report the following. Can we progress by 2 slides, please? Let's go and take a quick look at the research, given our need to kind of move forward quickly. Right there. Patricia, in answer to your question, research has shown that kids are more highly engaged, motivated with PBL than in traditional modes of instruction. They're more engagement with the content, and that leads to the second thing, which directly addresses your content. PBL is going to result in increased academic achievement. It has been shown to be successful from kindergarten up through grade 12, though much of the emphasis within PBL literature, and many of the examples tend to be middle and high school. I want to see more work here on PBL from kindergarten on up. It has been shown to be effective, but like I say, when you look at the actual efficacy results and some of the reports of the research, much of it is middle and high school. I think we need to look back a little in the lower grades, because frankly, if kids are doing this type of highly intensive and highly engaging project in grade 3, they're going to enter grade 6 more ready to do it. Now, take a look at that third research result. And again, Patricia, this gets at your question. There was an initial assumption underlying some of the work on PBL perhaps 10, 15 years ago, that while PBL may result in increased knowledge of the content of the project, it really doesn't help on a standardized test because the content may not be as broad as standardized tests. Well, what we now know, the research has shown that even on standardized statewide testing, students are going to do better under PBL. And that research question has been answered positively. Now, it does mean that we need to make certain Common Core standards are mapped across projects. I see Katie's comment, state testing replaced with CCS, so consortium assessments include project-based learning or project-based assessments. Katie, I have not had a chance to weigh in on those assessment packages that are, as I understand it, are still being developed associated with Common Core. I know there are 2 different groups developing them, and I think 30 states are associated with one group and 20 with another. But what we do know is on existing standardized tests, pre-Common Core, students did better under PBL. Anita's comment, and motivation is very important here. Okay, I'm seeing Wendy, let's see, Chard. Wendy, could you share that comment with us? I don't see if I can go back to that one. That you said there's some people who have done a lot of work on lower grade PBL projects. Chard and Lillian Katz done work internationally pre-K through 3. I'm going to go to Sylvia's website. I'm going to make a note of that. Thank you, Wendy, for sharing that. I'm student teacher and told no time to create PBL. Stick with teaching notes. And oh, okay, Patricia, that's going to be a fun one. Let me try to answer you this way. It is always a fact that as a student teacher, you're probably taking over someone else's classroom. And again, while I want to encourage you to move into PBL, I'm not sure that a quarter or semester in student teaching experience, particularly if you're in a school where neither the teachers nor the kids nor your supervising teacher has really gotten a good handle on PBL, I'm not sure you want to launch into it as a student teaching, in a student teaching situation. I'd be happy to share some more thoughts with you on that. In fact, my email is at the top slide in this presentation. You're welcome to email me directly, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Having said that, I believe I can assure you PBL is where we're going to go. Not only is Common Core going to push us in that way, we're going to find that we do a better job on teaching Common Core than we will with traditional instruction. Very good. Let me ask you if there are any additional questions. We've gone a little bit past time, but I think we can take 3 or 4 more minutes for additional questions. And again, if something occurs to you after you look at these handouts, I do urge you all to get the handouts, look at the 3 videos that are in there. We've taken time to look at one of them today, but do look at all 3 of them. And email me with any questions you have. I don't mind responding to direct emails. I do it all the time from workshops I do. Anyone have any other comments or questions they'd like to share? Jody, thank you for sharing that about charge work. I'll be looking at Sylvia Chard, I believe you said, and I'll be looking up that website. There are several sources. Ed Vision Schools is one. I love the work from the Buck Institute. This work is cited within my handout. I've got an extensive reference list, 8, 10, 12 references in there, and I wanted to make sure that many of them were. There's my direct email for you. And Jeff is asking how do we get the handouts. I believe I was answered. I think you just download them from Corwin Press website, Jeff. Any other question or comments about PBL? Well, folks, let me close. If we can flip over that last screen then, Dwight. I want to give you a promise and a warning. The promise is PBL provides the best option implementation of Common Core. It's going to have a positive impact we want, and it's the best chance we have to make Common Core implementation actually mean something critically important for our kids. Again, folks, I'm a supporter of Common Core, but simply having new standards is not in and of itself going to result in increased academic achievement. However, if we build in the Common Core in the context of PBL, we will have that standard. And the next slide there. Here's a warning. See, the Common Core is not going to have that import unless we are willing to change our instruction to match 21st century learning needs. And the prediction, I believe that most teachers are going to do this. I think over the next 5 to 8 years, we're going to see project-based learning become characteristic of many, many classrooms, if not the majority of the classrooms. This is simply 21st century teaching. And when you compare it to what we're doing in many classrooms today, this is a way to engage kids. An invitation for you. I'd love to work with your school, PBL, Professional Development, and Common Core. I do many, many workshops, webinars, book studies, that type of thing. You can contact me directly. My wife rents me out across the nation, 40, 50 times a year. I'd also love to undertake some book studies with some of your faculty on that project-based learning book that is now available with our Corwin Press. And we mentioned that a little earlier. But again, final invitation, do email me with any questions or comments. I've enjoyed talking with you. Wish we had a little bit more time here, and I apologize for the 5 minutes at first. But I'll hand it back to Dwight now. Dwight, you're going to mention that Common Core Institute once again?
Yes, we're looking at a slide right now. This is also the one I mentioned earlier in the beginning. Corwin is hosting a Common Core Institute in Memphis, Tennessee on October 18th and 19th, and we are very proud that William Bender will be there doing one of the keynotes. We're all very excited about it. You can register at www.corwin.com. Also, I'd like to offer everyone a special 10% discount on William Bender's new books. The current new exciting book, of course, is the Project-Based Learning. His other books are Differentiating Instruction, and his new book, Cool Tech Tools, which comes out later this fall. On your screen, you'll see promo code D12, letter 8. A is an apple and the number 5. That is a good discount for 10%, good through September 15th at Corwin.com. And like I said, we will be sure to email this presentation to all the attendees afterwards. And also, I saw that some people had some questions on diversity and equity. We also have a cultural proficiency website. It is www.culturalproficiency.com, which that'll be in the slides as well. But without further ado, I just wanted to thank William Bender for joining the session today, and everyone who joined. And we thank you so much. We appreciate your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.